All right, let's see if we're going here. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to everyone watching online. Let me just make sure that our stream is healthy. It tells you that. Okay. So we can proceed. We have lots of great questions. We'll start with some online questions. That's all looking good. Okay. All right, let's begin. This question comes from Thakur, who lives in Pondicherry. He asks about the current Iran war. And he makes reference to the fact that we have discussed Vedantic perspective on war at length when we've talked about the Mahabharata. And we've distinguished what we call a dharma yuddha. Please don't conflate dharma yuddha and jihad. Jihad is a holy war, and the conventional understanding is if you are a kafir, if you are not Muslim, then there is religious sanction to kill you. That's I'm not sure if it's a Quranic interpretation, but that is a conventional interpretation of jihad. Our definition of dharmic war, dharma yuddha, is very specific. And a dharma yuddha is a war in which not fighting the war has worse consequences than fighting it. Most wars probably don't meet that criterion. World War II certainly did, well, unquestionably, but many wars will not come up to that bar. So then the question that Thakur raises here is, what about the current war in Iran? Does that meet that criteria? I have no idea. It's a really, really complicated situation. The relationship between the United States and Israel is complicated. The relationship between the United States and Iran is much more complicated than you think. Do you know that the CIA supported a coup in 1953 in Iran? So there's a long history there, complicated history. So obviously we're not going to talk, nor am I qualified really to talk about all of that. The simple observation we can make though is this: if Iran was indeed on the cusp of creating a nuclear weapon and using that nuclear weapon, that would justify the war. The question is that a fact or not? I have no idea. And sadly, I think most of our governmental leaders also don't really know. And here's the problem. Decisions having tremendous consequence are being made based on inadequate information, inadequate understanding of the situation. And that can't be good. So it would be hard to foresee a good outcome when a war is undertaken with such poor information. No matter how good decision makers are. That's another thing. How good are our decision makers is another issue. We won't even touch that one. But how good is the information they're working upon it looks pretty sketchy. Remember the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? You know, we've been there before, so it's complicated. But that would be the basic criteria. If Iran truly were threatening not just the U.S. but Israel and the world with actual nuclear weapons, absolutely that would be a dharma yuddha to fight against them. But that's highly questionable if that's really a truth or not, and I don't think you and I have any way of knowing what is the truth in that regard. Next question here comes from Arun, who lives in Bangalore. We know that experiences take place in the mind. All experiences, as you have explained in earlier satsangs, are in the domain of chidabhasa, a reflection of consciousness, manifestation of we would just say thoughts, forms in your mind. How then can there be discernment between, this is a little technical, but I'll explain it, discernment between asanga chaitanya and chidabhasa. Asanga chaitanya, just pure consciousness, to use simple terminology. Pure consciousness versus consciousness reflected in the mind. This is the question. How to discern the difference between what is pure consciousness and what is the manifestation of consciousness in the mind. His question is about experience and the discernment between pure consciousness and reflected consciousness is not a matter of experience. It's a matter of understanding. He uses the word discernment. So we need to understand what is the difference. Let me make that obvious. If you see me sitting here, suppose there were a mirror here, or better yet, a computer screen, and a lifelike image was seen by you. So how to discern the difference? If the image you see is absolutely the same as me, how would you discern the difference? Not through experience, because your experiences, they're the same. So this discernment has to go beyond experience. And in fact, something that I think many people fail to appreciate is Vedanta, among other things, is a critique on experience itself, because we have all come to assume that what you experience is real. And Vedanta shows us again and again and again that it's simply not so. Our experiences give misleading information all the time. You've seen me give this example. This chair arm is not solid. It's made of atoms which are almost entirely empty space. Yet we experience solidity. And science explains this very elegantly by saying the electrons in the outer layer of atoms in your hand repel the electrons in the outer layers of this chair. It's electrostatic force, electrons repelling electrons. Is that what you feel? Oh, electrostatic repulsion. I'm just illustrating how experience in and of itself is not an indicator as to what is real. What is real requires an analysis of that experience. And that's what Vedanta does. I called it a critique. By the way, that term critique doesn't mean to criticize. It means to analyze. We analyze experience. and understand what's really going on. So the distinction between pure consciousness and reflected consciousness in your mind is not made. That distinction is not a distinction born of experience. It's a distinction made with the help of the teachings of Advaita Vedanta plus introspection, Atma Vichara. Notice Atma Vichara is experience, right? You turn your attention within, what's going on inside, that's experience. The point I'm making is we're not throwing out experience at all. We acknowledge the centrality of experience in our lives. What could be more central to your life than experience, after all? But we want to look at that experience through the lens of Vedanta and understand it properly. Enough said. Next question comes from Ganesh, who lives in Secunderabad, Andhra Pradesh. Question about polytheism. Recently, a renowned Vaishnava saint, who was a proponent of Vishishta Advaita, he got into a controversy after he made some derogatory remarks about Adi Shankara, also against the Shiva Lingam. Of course, this has been causing immense turmoil among Hindus who believe in polytheism. What causes scholarly people to make derogatory comments about other beliefs and sentiments? I think that's a good question. And it, like everything else, it's more complicated than it seems. To make critical comments of another religious or spiritual tradition can have two very different intents. The intention behind those comments can be very different. One is quite good, the other is not so good. The good intent is for comparison and contrast. I do this often in the classes. I'll bring up something that's taught in Christianity or Islam or other branches of the Hindu tradition, other darshanas. It's common for any educator to use comparison and contrast in teaching. In fact, it's considered essential. If you're going to be a good teacher, you need to employ all the tools that you can use, and comparison and contrast is one of those many tools. So, for example, when I say that in biblical traditions, for your finite sins, you can be condemned to eternal damnation. Finite sins leads to eternal damnation. So this is a statement critical of biblical beliefs. But what is my intent? If I bring that up in a class, is my intent to say, therefore Christianity is junk, the Bible is junk? Or is my intent to show that an irrational belief should be discarded? Notice it says a finite deed having an infinite result. That's contrary to reason. So if I were to bring that up in a class, what is the motivation is not to criticize the Bible or biblical religious traditions. The purpose of that statement then would be to point out the problem of irrational beliefs. So this I would say is a healthy criticism of another religious tradition. But I have a feeling that's not what Ganesh is referring to here. He is saying derogatory remarks against Shankara and against the worship of Shiva Linga. It might be something local in Secunderabad or Andhra. I don't know what's going on down there, but I can easily imagine this kind of problem comes up again and again, and not just amongst Hindus. It comes up in every religious tradition. There are so many religious teachers who vilify other religious and spiritual traditions. Not for the sake of comparison and contrast, but for the sake of making those other traditions look bad, harmful, avoid them at all costs. That's a very different motivation, right? So you want to, for the sake of promoting your own religious tradition, you make derogatory statements about others. That's not teaching, is it? In fact, we call that preaching. The difference between teaching and preaching, I think, is fairly clear. A preacher is one who wants you to accept what they are saying. And so if I want you to accept what I'm saying, I'm going to be highly critical of what other people are saying to show that there's no point at all in accepting what they say. This is preaching. This is not teaching. One more thing I would add is it's based on a basic insecurity. This is just an observation. As a teacher, what I observe is if you are confident in the integrity and authenticity of your own religious and spiritual tradition, maybe you wouldn't be so eager to criticize everyone else. But there's this insecurity. Of course, there's also, in a more crass way, there's a desire to build up your community of followers and to get more money and all of this stuff. That's all part of it as well. You can see that it's the motivation that counts a lot. I'll just share one more point, and that is when I do make references to biblical religions and other traditions, I often get criticized for doing that. Swamiji, why are you putting down the Bible? Again, what is my motivation? Is my motivation to make the Bible look bad so that Vedanta looks good? Or is my motivation, in the example I gave before, to show the problem of irrational beliefs? Every time I make a reference to another religious or spiritual tradition, I'm very careful about this, extremely careful about this. Maybe because I've gotten so many criticisms over the years. I continue to do it, but I do it very carefully. I use comparison and contrast as a teaching tool. I will continue to use comparison and contrast as a teaching tool. If it pushes someone's buttons, it's because they don't understand what comparison and contrast is all about. They misunderstand my motivation. They misread my motivation. I have no vested interest in putting down anyone else, and certainly I have no insecurity about the integrity and authenticity of this Vedantic tradition. So there's no insecurity. Anyway, you get the point. Enough said. Next question here from Patrick. Patrick, who lives in Kentucky. He says, when my emotions and moods are pleasant or neutral, I feel aligned with Ishvara's intelligent order. But when unpleasant feelings arise, I sometimes fall into the delusion that I'm separate from the order and I need to fix something to return to my normal. Reminding myself that I am just a witness to these unpleasant emotional states is very challenging when I am in the midst of them. So a couple of things are going on here. Patrick is talking about feelings. He's talking about remembrance. Let's talk about these two. Feelings and remembrance. Feelings first. Feeling that you are non-separate from Ishvara's intelligent order. Wonderful. Feels good. Feels really good. Is there such a thing as a permanent feeling? Feeling means emotion, right? There's no such thing as a permanent emotion or feeling. So that's the first observation, and that is being non-separate from Ishvara's intelligent order is not a matter of feeling, nor is it a matter of remembrance. Oh, I forgot. You don't forget who you are. This is a matter of self-knowledge, self-discovery. When you discover, using the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, in your own practice of Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, when you personally discover, when you realize, when you verify or validate this truth, that you have always been non-separate from Ishvara's intelligent order, that recognition, that knowledge doesn't come and go. You don't need to remember it because it's who you are. You don't need to feel it because feelings come and go. It becomes your fundamental reality. It becomes your world view. That's a nice expression. When your world view shifts, and that shift takes time. Eventually, with the help of these teachings and your ongoing practice, your world view shifts in such a way that you naturally see yourself as an integral part of Ishvara's intelligent order. So it's not a matter of feeling like you're part of Ishvara's intelligent order, nor is it a matter of remembering. It becomes who you are. I'll take one more question here. This question is from Carol. Carol in Arizona. She asks, my brother recently passed away, and I would like to share specific passages pertaining to transmigration from the Bhagavad Gita in his celebration of life. Good to have a celebration of your brother's life. Of course, we're very sad for Carol's loss. What would be a good verses to recite from the Bhagavad Gita in a celebration of life? Not specifically transmigration, because that's not really the essence of the Bhagavad Gita or of Advaita Vedanta. But it happens that in the Bhagavad Gita, starting in chapter 2, verse 11, Sri Krishna begins, that's the very beginning of Sri Krishna's Upadesha, his spiritual instruction to Arjuna. And he touches on transmigration in that discussion, but it's really focused on the eternality of the self. No one dies because no one got born in the first place. This is really the message of Sri Krishna. So it's a convention. But in Hinduism, of course, there are many different traditions and communities that do things in different ways. But a very common convention in a celebration of life would be to recite chapter 2, verses 11, I think it's 11 through 25. I think it's verse 26, that Swadharma. The topic Swadharma comes in with verse 26. That's the next topic. So I think verses 11 through 25. And you can check the 25. If it's followed by Swadharma, then I've got it right. I'm pretty sure it's right. To recite verses 11 through 25. But if you're going to recite them, please recite them with the meaning. Most people won't understand the Sanskrit. The meaning is so beautiful and profound. Include the meaning. Something else that's often recited, and for religiously minded Hindus, there's one particular mantra that's held to be more important than any other mantra. When a loved one is either dying or has died, and that is the Maha Mrityunjaya mantra. It's found in the Yajurveda, part of the Rudra hymn, and it's the familiar to most people, Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandham Pushti Vardhanam, and it goes on like that. So that particular mantra can be called Triambakam mantra, but more formally it's called Maha Mrityunjaya mantra. The recitation of that mantra is considered a very important blessing. Just a comment in a celebration of life, and I like that expression, celebration of life. When we get together after someone has died, let's be very clear that for whose sake are we performing these ceremonies? And it's clearly for our own sakes. Our departed loved one is okay. They don't need our prayers. Honestly, they don't need our prayers. They're in a better place. We need healing. And a celebration of life, chanting of Bhagavad Gita and Mahamrityunjaya mantra are wonderful for our own healing after we've suffered a loss. Okay, we have a lot more questions here. Do we have any questions here? You'll need the microphone.
This is a big daunting question, I don't think, but I have a friend who's a very devout Christian, and I shared with him your English recitation of the Gita.
Oh.
And he was actually very receptive to it, but I noticed that when it came to he was receptive to the story, but he almost like drew himself back from the spiritual teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my question is about Hinduism and apologetics, as in how do we work in a framework, whereas more Abrahamic and biblical traditions are sort of more intelligible to each other than Hinduism, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just what's your opinion on that?
Okay, that's a good question. You used the word apologetics, which is a theological term used in Western religion to describe making religious teachings reasonable. Is to put, by the way, doesn't mean apology, right? And nothing to do with apologetics. It's a rational pursuit. Making it all sound rational, making it acceptable. And it turns out that apologetics is important in Western theology because Western religions are religions that practice proselytization. If you want others to practice your religion, you better be ready. You better have some techniques on hand which are effective in conveying your beliefs to someone else in a way that they will find acceptable, and so that they can embrace those beliefs. So that's a process of proselytization. And here we stumble, in a manner of speaking, because Hinduism is not a tradition that practices proselytization. There is no... First of all, we have to get back to some basics. In the Bible, followers are taught to, and I don't remember the biblical passage. I'm not like I study the Bible all the time, but the Bible commands followers to spread the good word, as it were. And I think good word is an English translation of the Greek word gospel. I think gospel is a Greek word, and it means good words. So you're supposed to spread the words of Jesus, spread the gospels, spread the good word of the Bible. The Bible itself commands you to do that. Show me where in Hindu scriptures you are commanded to spread Hindu teachings to others. So there's a fundamental difference here. So there's a biblical basis for proselytization. That basis is completely absent in the Hindu tradition. On the other hand, if someone is drawn to the Hindu tradition, the door is wide open. And even if this is, but I have to preface this, I don't promote rituals of conversion, but there are such things. If you want to convert to be a Hindu in a ritualistic manner, there are rituals to accommodate that. In my view, it's completely unnecessary, but if that's something you're drawn to do, the door is open for a non-Hindu to undergo rituals of conversion, whether they, if they truly want to or not. Just, you can simply embrace Hindu teachings. I'm not sure, am I addressing your question? Maybe not. Do you want to follow up on that?
Sure. So, I guess I'm more asking, how do we represent, like, in terms of interfaith dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
how do we make that easier, I guess?
Okay, that's a different question, and I'm glad you asked the second one. Interfaith dialogue can be really helpful. I'm smiling. I'm It's not always helpful. It depends on the other person, right? And I'm smiling because this is in the 1990s, it goes back a few years ago. I was involved in some interfaith dialogue activities. I was a newly minted Swami, and I'm going out to all these different organizations and doing things. And my gurus asked me, "Why are you doing this?" and he was genuinely clueless about why I would want to do this. I found value in it. I thought there was value in it. And occasionally there is, absolutely. The problem, however, is many followers of any religion are not capable of honest dialogue. Dialogue means the ability to listen to the other. And sadly, what happens many times is that the person with the Bible, the typical thing, this happens all the time. Just turn it into a story, and I think this will address the issue. So the fellow shows up at your door on a Saturday morning, wearing a dark suit coat and carrying a Bible in his hand, and he says, "Would you like to discuss the Bible?" And you say, sure, I'm interested in a discussion, come on in. So you give them a cup of coffee and you start talking about the Bible. But it's not really, in that situation, it's not a discussion at all. Discussion is two-sided. This person has an agenda to get you to accept something in the Bible. That urge to proselytize is a huge obstacle to genuine religious dialogue. There is such a thing as genuine religious dialogue, and I remember attending some conferences where I found some really sincere people who were curious to know, how does Hinduism approach this? How does Advaita Vedanta approach this? They were sincerely interested and wanted to learn. And I can't say I was already raised in a biblical tradition, so I had less to learn from them. Perhaps they had more to learn from me, and I was happy to participate in that way. So there were cases of genuine dialogue where the other person wanted to learn. So I guess my suggestion for you is, if you are with someone who genuinely has an interest to know, then you share whatever you understand, you share. And that's a simple thing. We share what we understand. What you don't understand, don't talk about it. That's a simple rule. So just talk about the thing. And by the way, if you're asked a question about something that you don't understand, you just say, I don't understand. That's the best response is, I can't answer your question. I don't understand that part well enough for myself. So that kind of honesty, intellectual honesty, is really, really important. So if you're lucky enough to have a friend who's interested in dialogue, sincere dialogue, then enjoy it. It's I think, in a best case scenario, it's mutually enriching. And this was something that used to be, back in the 1990s, a topic that was often brought up in these conferences I used to attend. Obviously, I don't attend them anymore. But in those days, the ethos, which was really beautiful, and that is a Christian who attends an interfaith conference becomes a better Christian. A Muslim who attends becomes a better Muslim. A Hindu who attends becomes a better Hindu. Because we learn about our own religious traditions. What did I say before? Comparison and contrast. So there's an important role. So, and for you, you may find that your understanding of Hindu and Vedanta concepts, your understanding becomes more clear when you explain them to others. So it's beneficial to you as well as for the other person. A good question. Okay, other questions here?
Swamiji, my question was on sarvatma bhava. That the word bhava is a feeling, right? So for an enlightened person, given the fact that bhava is a feeling, and feelings, like you said, can come and go, so I just wanted to understand that it comes from a place of knowledge. So why do we call it bhava?
Okay. And the problem here is, actually there's a linguistic problem here. Hindi mein bhav, yani, what is it? There's an Urdu word, for feeling. Aisas? Aisas. Right? That kind of emotional feeling. In the expression sarvatma bhava, bhava doesn't mean feeling. Words have different meanings in different contexts. Bhava also means existence. Sarvatma bhava is your very existence as the self of all. Meaning, you are not merely the consciousness that illumines the activities of your mind. You are the all-pervasive consciousness that illumines the activities of all minds. This is not a feeling. It is not an experience. It is a fact. A fact of who you are. It's an existential fact. And in this case, the term bhava refers to that existence. You exist as sarvatma, as the self of all. Does that work for you? Good, good. Okay. Before we run out of time, we got some more good questions here. Oh, let me not forget this one. I was going to do this first. In our previous satsang, there was a question from Fatima, who lives in Pakistan. Nice to receive her question. And part of her question was, can it be that what is dharmic in one culture is not dharmic in another culture? And in answering that question, I said, well, our principle of dharma is a universal principle based on ahimsa, based on doing whatever causes the least injury. So I said, technically, it's not possible. But then she didn't give any examples, so she replied with an example. I'm glad she did. And the example she gives, what about, and I think Fatima is probably raised in a Islamic family, and she talks about during Eid, their celebration, where they slaughter a goat and offer that goat to Allah. Good. Which is not terribly unlike offering animals in the ancient Hindu times. Also, animals were offered. So animal sacrifice is a common feature in many religious traditions. And so the question is, suppose you have a one, so since I've already talked about animal sacrifice being performed in Hindu tradition, we have to go for another example, Buddhist tradition. So Buddhists have never practiced animal sacrifice, ever. So, I'm just checking. Yeah. No, I don't. I'm thinking about the Tibetan traditions, which came later. But even in those traditions, I can't think of any possibility of that. So then, how would a Buddhist look at this animal sacrifice as being adharmic? Well, if the Buddhist really understands dharma, it's more complicated than that. Dharma, as we said, is the path of least harm. Obviously, slaughtering an animal causes harm to the animal. In certain religious circles, and I think celebration of Eid would be a great example. If those who were celebrating Eid were told, you can't sacrifice a goat, how would they feel? Their celebration would be destroyed, which would be harmful to their religious sentiments. It would harm them in a religious sense. They would lose out on an opportunity to worship Allah through this goat sacrifice. They would feel guilty. they would feel religiously inadequate. They'd feel bad. So now we have to, now here's the trick. We have to measure the amount of harm caused to the goat versus the amount of harm caused to a religious community by depriving them of the opportunity to offer that goat as a religious sacrifice. If, and I have no idea how to make this, but if you determine that the harm to the community from not offering the goat is more than the harm to the goat, then slaughtering the goat would actually be dharmic. If the religious sentiments were so intense that the community would feel badly offended, deprived, whatever negative feelings they might have, if those feelings were sufficiently intense, that might indeed justify the slaughtering of the goat, if that were the case. The point here is that dharma, properly understood, is a universal principle. Least harm. And being a principle of least harm, it's independent of culture, and it's independent of place, independent of time, ancient time versus modern times. But what makes it complicated is this evaluation. So that's the real, I can't say trick. The essence of dharma is not simply don't harm. It's least harm. And making that discernment of least harm is not easy at all. Next question comes from Jay, who lives in New York. Jay says, he hears from conspiratorial-minded people that they say that religions and spiritual practices were created by and pushed by governments and the ruling classes to keep us enslaved, to dominate people, and keep them from revolting against oppressive and unnatural systems that we believe in. You know, it's so, in addressing a question like this, one huge mistake many people will make is to turn it into a yes-no question. It's like everything in life, it's complex. First of all, can you really say that organized religions have never, ever used religion to manipulate people? Of course not. I'm being really sarcastic. You get that, right? So organized religions have, throughout history, employed religious manipulation. Roman Catholic Church was famous for doing this through the medieval period. I mean, just horrible abuses. Anyway, did it happen? Yes. Now, does that mean all religions and spiritual traditions exist only for the sake of manipulating people? Come on. Be a little bit more nuanced than that. It's more complicated than that. Consider the origins of these religions. The ancient sages sitting in their huts and meditating. Do they have any concern about manipulating others and what is this, ruling class and governments? Nothing. Even great prophets Actually, probably there is some politics involved. Maybe I shouldn't use that example. Mystics. The mystics of every religious tradition had no ulterior motive other than to know and experience God. What has that got to do with manipulation and governments and controlling people? So, did religious manipulation happen? Absolutely. Is that why religions exist? Absolutely not. So we need to be a little bit more finessed in our understanding of questions like that. Here's a fairly elaborate question from Neil, who lives in North Carolina. And he listened to a lecture of mine on the doctrine of karma, in which I acknowledged that chance or randomness is a factor. What is it that affects you in life? Karma? Karma, which karma? The karma you do today or the karma you did 1,000 years ago? It's a trick question. Does the karma you do today affect you, or does the karma you did in prior lives affect you? And yes is the correct answer. They both affect you. And what about the karma that other people do? That affects you. And then I suggested also there is such a thing as randomness, chance. And Neil has a fairly elaborate argument with chance, and he says that if we were to acknowledge the existence of chance as a factor, then the materialistic nihilist can argue that all the variance we see in the world is entirely due to this factor called chance. This is another example of black or white thinking. So a simple-minded materialist might take that extreme position and say everything is chance, but a nuanced materialist would probably take a more nuanced position. Anyway, I don't want to get into the details of Neil's argument, but here's the very simple position in the doctrine of karma. Doctrine of karma is meant to explain our experience. We experience the effects of our actions. We experience the effects of other people's actions. And it turns out that some of what we experience is not a result of anything. It is random. Science has established without a shadow of a doubt that there is randomness in the universe. The whole, what's called quantum theory, this is a theory that followed Einstein. In fact, Einstein resisted it and ended up admitting it was correct. Anyway, quantum theory is based on randomness. Randomness is a natural feature of the universe in which we live. Therefore, randomness is part of what we experience. Since the doctrine of karma is meant to help us understand our experiences, if randomness is part of our experiences, it has to be part of the doctrine. We can't say everything is. This goes back to Cartesian logic, where everything has a cause. And it turns out everything doesn't have a cause. Cartesian logic has been, that's 400 years ago or something, and that's been overthrown long since. There is such a thing as randomness in life, and we have to acknowledge and deal with that. Okay, maybe just one or two more questions. This question from Amit, who lives in India. In Vedanta, pursuit of awareness and removal of ignorance results in the end of suffering. Ignorance is the root cause of suffering. But in worldly life, it is often seen that ignorance is bliss. Okay. And he goes on to say, we see ignorant people indulging in greed, enjoying power and influence, living lavish lifestyles, creating wars. We just talked about that. And okay, absolutely true. And are they suffering as a result? Maybe, maybe not. One thing is absolutely true, though. If you commit an adharmic deed out of ignorance, you may not suffer the consequence immediately, but eventually the consequence is there. There's no such thing as an action without a result. Every deed has its consequences. Turns out that actions we commit due to ignorance have far worse consequences than actions we do based on genuine wisdom. So Amit is absolutely correct. There are so many people acting based on ignorance today, and they may be enjoying their lavish lifestyles now, but there are consequences for their ignorance-based actions, especially for adharmic actions. The consequences will come. The American expression, by the way, is the consequences will come and bite you. And the question is when. They could bite you tomorrow. They could bite you in 10 years. If not, you'll have to come back. And then you'll get bitten. But eventually consequences catch up with you. There's no such thing as a free pass. Last question. This is Diego from Mexico. He is talking about Shankara's text, Bhaja Govindam. And he says, it surprised me that the text emphasizes bhakti. Can you share something about this text? I'm not sure why to be surprised. There are many texts on bhakti attributed to Sri Shankaracharya. Certainly there's nothing contradictory about an Advaitin writing a text on bhakti. No contradiction whatsoever. In fact, there are several videos on my website, on my YouTube channel, that talk about the reconciliation of non-dual knowledge and bhakti. I don't know why, but some people have it in their minds. It's one or the other. It's not one or the other. So Shankara, no doubt, had a strong devotional stream running through his life and through his teachings. To make matters a little bit more complicated, everything that's written and attributed to Sri Shankara, Adi Shankara, was not necessarily written by Adi Shankara himself. So Bhaja Govindam is a very its approach is very simplistic. I don't want to go through it's rather lengthy. I don't want to summarize it. But it takes a very simplistic view of life. It says, you're born, you suffer for some years, and then you die. What's the point? You might as well pray to God. And basically, that every verse is more or less like that. Life is miserable, and then you die. Therefore, pray to Govinda. Verse after verse, some 20-some verses go on like that. It's very simplistic, or to use the American expression, dumbed down. Meaning, to me, it's probably not the work of Adi Shankara himself. He wouldn't write something dumbed down like that. Great many works have been attributed to him. That's the convention. If you are an unknown teacher and you've written something that you think is really special and you want your composition to survive, if you put your unknown name on this piece of work, on this composition, it'll get lost. No one, remember, this is before the printing press, in days when things were copied out by hand on palm leaves or on parchment. Not parchment, but on bark. Parchment, by the way, is animal skin. I don't think they ever used that in India. But they'd use other, plant-derived parchments and bark. Anyway, the point is that works were copied out by hand, and if you wanted your composition to survive, you would have a better chance of survival if you put Shankara's name on it instead of your own name on it. So for this very pragmatic reason, there are so many works out there attributed to Adi Shankara that were not actually written by Adi Shankara. Given the nature of by the way, Bhaja Govindam is a wonderful composition. It's just not at Shankara's level. So please enjoy Bhaja Govindam, but it need not be considered a work of Adi Shankara himself. Okay, this is a good place to conclude for today with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. See you next time.